Chapter 2791. When other people saw it, they would at most marvel at the mountain peak floating in the sky and wouldn't be able to explain it. As Yun Piaomiao exclaimed in admiration, he sized up the little girl and couldn't resist laughing. "Little doll, you have good eyesight. Is there a reward?" Aber asked expressionlessly, "For example, half the rent or something?" Emo Lien and the others almost laughed out loud. Don't look at the little fellow's straight face, she was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Yun Piaomiao actually laughed out loud and shook his head. That's not possible. The little girl's face was wooden. Do I have to pay additional rent? How many servants are there? Do I have to feed them? Everyone. Ha 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 ha. Yun Piaomiao roared with laughter. The little girl looked at him as if he was a lunatic. What was so funny? Shouldn't they ask clearly? If they raised a bunch of idle people and had to feed them, wouldn't they suffer a huge loss? The one-time rent is 20,000 a month. It includes daily meals for cleaning, garden trimming servants, kitchen maids, and so on. Of course, if you aren't satisfied with the vegetables and fruits provided by the academy and want additional meals, you have to buy them yourselves. Seeing the little girl's frown, Yun Piaomiao added, "Don't worry, the food provided to the special class housing estate is fresh vegetables, meat, and fruits every day. It's still very good. It's enough for 10 people. Oh, it includes meals." This was slightly better. Little Fatty, Qi Xianxian, and the others felt a little better after hearing this. All right. Xiao Mu nodded her small head vigorously. It was good to have a large housing estate. Everyone could settle down, and it would save them the trouble of having 2 people living in the east and 2 people living in the west. It would be uncomfortable and troublesome. If they wanted to discuss something with them, they would have to notify the entire residential area. With her nod, Prince Mo, Duan Yu, Duan Mu Qing, and Lu Yu started fighting to pay. Yun Piaomiao couldn't help but twitch his mouth. A bunch of freaking nouveau riches. They were obviously very rich, but they were still freaking pretending and wanted to bargain with him. They really were a bunch of shameless brats. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have provided meals. In the end, Prince Mo was the first to pay the bill. Only when he said that they would pay next month did the crowd calm down. The super-rich Xiao Mu silently glanced at them and put away the money bag that she was about to take out. Last time, Grandpa Mu sent her a storage talisman and gave her another 5 million spirit coins. In addition to the 150 million that Mu Jingfeng had previously given him. And then there was the cash compensation from the various families. The super-rich darling Xiao now had close to 200 million spirit coins in cash. Even if the annual rent was 240,000 yuan, Miss Qiao could live there for a few hundred years. Alright, let's do that then. Miss Qiao suddenly had a feeling that she shouldn't have wasted her breath with Yun Piaomiao just now. She shouldn't have wasted her breath and haggled with him for half a day just for a few coins. So tired. Why haven't you brought us there yet? Sir Jojo glanced at Cloud Mist. Dean Yun couldn't help but be amused and angry at the same time. Follow me. Donglin Court. It was one of the 4 special class housing complexes in the student residential area. In less than 15 minutes, the news spread throughout the entire academy that another nouveau riche had moved into Donglin Court, which had a monthly rent of 20,000 yuan. Everyone was already very shocked that nouveau riches had moved into Chiohe Court and Xiachi Court for 2 consecutive days. Chapter 2792. They didn't expect that even Winter Forest Court would be rented out today. It seemed like there were quite a few nouveau riche among this year's new students. The study area would probably be bustling tomorrow. Some people couldn't help but laugh when they thought of this. After all, the older students had been in the academy for so long, so it was relatively easy for them to deal with a few new students. When they thought of how those nouveau riche new students might be defeated, some of the more sinister fellows couldn't help but snicker inwardly. All right. Before Principal Yun left, he said, being able to pass the heaven rank testing tablet means that student Xiao is undoubtedly the #1 student among the new students. Tomorrow is the first day of school for new students, so a general assembly will be held at 7 a.m. At that time, a new student representative will be invited to come up and say a few words. Student Xiao, be prepared. Arbor was baffled as he glared at Yun Piaomiao's departing figure. Who did he ask to speak? Ha 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 ha. The little fatty suddenly burst into laughter, laughing so hard that tears were about to fall. It was too hilarious. What was wrong with Principal Yun's head? He actually asked the stoic face to speak on stage? The stoic face was someone who normally wouldn't speak if she could and wouldn't explain if she could. He even asked her to speak on stage. Ha 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 ha. Emilienne also couldn't resist laughing when she looked down at the dumbfounded little fellow. Duan twitched his mouth and said, "It's fine. Principal Yun probably meant that you can go on stage and say a few words." Qi Xianxian glared fiercely at the little fatty. "You're not allowed to laugh at our Jojo. Jojo, it's fine. You can go on stage tomorrow. If you don't want to speak, just kill them with your gaze." Ha 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 ha. Lu Yu and the others clutched their stomachs in laughter. Arbor speechlessly glanced at Miss Xianxian and discovered that her expression was quite serious. "Let's go and assign the rooms." There were more than a dozen rooms in the entire Winter Forest Court, enough for everyone to stay in one room each. Everyone went back to rest after choosing their rooms. They were truly unbearably tired from rushing through the great north-facing forest for a day and night. After Qiao Mu finished bathing, she crawled into bed and saw Crown Prince Mo walking in from outside with his wet hair disheveled. She was truly a beautiful demon. Miss Qiao's eyes lit up, and she rolled onto the bed. Prince came forward, took off his clothes and snuggled under the covers. "Jojo, have you thought about what you want to say tomorrow?" "No." Miss Qiao stroked his hair. In that split second, Crown Prince Mo had already used the fire spirit to dry his hair. The Crown Prince reached out and pulled her into his arms. He asked with a smile, "Then what are you going to say to everyone on stage?" Chapter 2793. The competition between the three academies has been going on for a long time. For resources, for benefits, and for the glory of each of the three prefectures. Emilienne hugged the little fellow and spoke intermittently about several matters. After a while, he looked down and saw that the little fellow's breathing was even and she had already fallen asleep. He couldn't help but laugh and lowered his head to give her a light peck on her little mouth. Then, he laid her down flat and adjusted her sleeping position to a more comfortable one. He propped up his chin with one hand and gently stroked a few strands of hair by her cheek with his fingers. He stared at her intently for a long time. Early the next morning, everyone was woken up by the kitchen maid's hoarse voice. It was unknown where this kitchen maid came from, but when she saw that no one had come out of their rooms, she picked up a broken basin and started banging on it. As she knocked, she shouted, "Students, wake up. You're waking up a little too early. There's still 2 hours to 7 in the morning." Seeing everyone open the door and glare at her, the kitchen maid said with a serious expression, "Students, you still have to wash up and eat breakfast. It will take at least an hour to get from Winter Forest Court to the Academy District. It's forbidden to ride any kind of beast in the Academy. You can only rely on yourself to run, or use your spiritual energy to cast a flying spell to rush over." So that's how it was. Only then did everyone silently retract their glares and start washing up in resignation. Breakfast was quite sumptuous. While the group of 10 were eating, Mu Xingchen's voice came from outside. "Younger sister." Mu Xingchen was a senior student of the Imperial Academy. He naturally had his own room in the past. However, seeing that he was carrying a bag in his left hand and a lunchbox in his right, it seemed like he wanted to move in. Arbor looked up at him and expressionlessly ate the porridge in her hand. Mu Xingchen was already used to her stoic little cold face. He walked up and placed the lunchbox in front of everyone. "Younger sister, ginseng chicken soup, drink it while it's hot." Prince Mo glanced at his brother-in-law vigilantly. His brother-in-law even knew how to make soup. He was starting to feel threatened. "I'll take you to the learning area in a while. You're not familiar with this place. There's a small path from Donglin Garden, so it'll save you a lot of time. I'm Jojo's big brother, Mu Xingchen. You must be Jojo's friends. Let's get to know each other. When Qi Xianxian and the rest heard him speak so familiarly, they hurriedly stood up and greeted him. Big brother Mu, what are you carrying? My bedding. Mu Xingchen turned to Arbor and said, Sister, your place is spacious. I'll check out of my room. Let's stay together in the future. Everyone was speechless. The petty person in Emolien's heart kept thumping his chest and stamping his feet. If he had known earlier, he would have gotten a double room with Sir Qiao Qiao back then. Look at this big family. In the future, if he wanted to steal a kiss from his little wife, he would have to avoid his teammates and brother-in-law. So bitter. Arbor drank a small bowl of ginseng chicken soup made by Mu Xingchen. More than half of the soup went into the little fatty's stomach. After that, everyone praised their big brother's culinary skills. Everyone was beaming as they followed Mu Xingchen out of Donglin Garden and headed to the learning area. Along the way, Mu Xingchen introduced the buildings and sceneries to them. He brought them to the largest practice field in the learning area. At this time, many students were already there. The new students were gathered in a circle. The older students were also mixed together. They lowered their heads and whispered to each other. Chapter 2794. Arbor's group attracted quite a bit of attention when they went over. After all, everyone in this group had outstanding looks. Plus, many people had seen the little girl at the plaza on Main Academy Street before, so they were especially curious now. Their scrutinizing gazes continuously swept over the little girl, as if wanting to see through this child. What kind of energy was stored in such a tiny person's body to be able to shatter the heaven-rank testing steel in one go? Everyone whispered to each other, pointing and whispering to each other. Arbor turned a deaf ear to these words and followed Mu Xingchen through the crowd with Emolian, Duan Yu, and Qi Xianxian to arrive at the circle where the new student stood. Eldest young Sir Qin walked over with a grin and waved his paw at the little girl. Little fellow, we meet again. Arbor nodded reluctantly. She felt like the Qin estate's people were like lingering spirits that lingered everywhere she went. Eldest young Sir Qin winked and smiled at her. Little stoic, you can't be annoyed that I've appeared in front of you again, right? You're quite self-aware. Prince Mo held the little fellow's hand and walked to the side, throwing a look at eldest young Sir Qin for him to figure it out himself. The eldest young Sir wanted to chase after them and say a few words, but at this time, Headmaster Yun flew over from afar with several academy consecrators and a dozen or so valiant and formidable instructors. They stopped on a raised platform in front of the practice field. An instructor looked down at the 10,000 or so students below and said neither softly nor loudly, "New and old students, line up separately. This needs no further explanation, right?" Everyone started moving in unison. They each lined up in several hundred rows according to the three academies' factions. The old students had lined up who knew how many times. Every time the academy summoned students to the practice field for an important announcement, they would line up to give instructions. This had already become a routine. There were about 1,000 new students here, and they each lined up in 7 or 8 rows, crookedly lining up to the left of the old students. "Headmaster, please speak." Dean Yun walked up with an enigmatic look on his face. He didn't look like the talkative person who was trying to promote the special class housing estate to Arbor and the others yesterday. He said a few simple words of encouragement to the new students. Then, he waved his hand and gracefully retreated, giving the place to one of the Academy's worshippers. This consecrator of the Academy's disciplinary courtyard was notoriously fussy and strict. He recited all of the Royal Academy's rules and regulations according to the book, to the point that Xiao Mu was about to doze off. After reciting for half an hour, he finally finished reciting. After the Academy consecrator left, Principal Yun smiled and said to the crowd, "Now, let's invite the new representative, Student Xiao, to come on stage and say a few words." Eldest young Sir Qin's mouth twitched as he turned to look in Arbor's direction with an odd expression. At the same time, Dou Fenghua and Dou Fengmian, Qin Xin, Qin Xiu, Qin Jiu, and some of the patrician families of the Divine Province who somewhat understood the little stoic were also looking at her. Across the crowd, ACI, who was standing in Ming Province's line, also looked over curiously. Everyone was thinking at the same time, what did you want the little stoic to say on stage? Aber expressionlessly stood on the high platform of the practice field and gazed icily at the students below. Everyone felt as if they were being stared at by a ferocious beast. Students, study hard and don't provoke me. Otherwise, die. Everyone was flabbergasted. Chapter 2795. Principal Yun turned his head to look at the little fellow beside him in confusion. This. He asked her to say a few sentences, and she really did say a few sentences. Study hard and don't provoke her. Otherwise, die. It was a few sentences. Now, Principal Yun had a deep understanding of the meaning behind Yun Chong's meaningful gaze. Crown Prince Mo exasperatedly exchanged glances with the little fatty and the others. What was going on? Why was everyone looking at him as if he was a weirdo? He definitely didn't teach his wife to say these words. Last night, he asked his wife what she was going to say on stage. His wife said that she was just going to say a few sentences. He naively thought that his wife should know what to say. However, it was true. When she went on stage today, she just said a few sentences. 2 sentences. 2 sentences. After Sir Jojo said 2 sentences, she realized that everyone was silent. Everyone was looking at her as if they were looking at a god. She couldn't help but frown, turned her head and blinked hard at Principal Yun. Principal Yun. Kid, do you think everyone is a worm in your stomach? What do you mean by blinking? Sir Jojo blinked at Principal Yun again. One of the tutors at the side couldn't stand it anymore. He coughed lightly and said to Principal Yun, Principal, this student should be asking you if she can leave. This year's new student representative was definitely a weirdo. The instructors thought to themselves as they carefully sized up the little fellow. They realized that this little girl was expressionless from the start to the end. Her emotions didn't fluctuate at all. It looked like she was really a cold-faced little doll. Principal Yun pursed his lips and laughed awkwardly. He reluctantly went up to save the situation and said, Student Chao's meaning should be, for everyone to, study hard, work hard, and help each other. The entire royal school should be tied together like a rope. Don't fight, bitch. Dog fight. Dog fight. Just because we are from different factions. Appropriate competition is necessary, but we should also pay attention to the friendship between students, right? The students below all heaved a sigh of relief. That should be the case. What the dean said was still somewhat reasonable. Previously, they must have misunderstood the little girl's meaning. The little girl shouldn't have threatened them on the first day of school. It was difficult for Headmaster Yun to say so much in one breath to smooth things over for the little stoic. He wanted to cry tears of sympathy for himself. Was it easy for him? No. Just as Principal Yun finished speaking his impassioned words to save the situation, the little stoic directly denied it. I just want to warn them to be careful and stop bothering me. She turned her head and glanced at Dean Yun. Once I make a move, there is no turning back. Everyone was speechless. Dean Yun's breath was stuck in his throat, and he almost choked from anger. This little girl was truly someone who could anger someone to death without paying for it. Could this be considered as him failing to save the situation by going all out to save the day? This little girl is quite arrogant. A rough voice suddenly emerged from the group of students. Everyone turned their heads to look and saw a guy draped in tiger skin, revealing his arms and legs. His appearance was especially bold and unrestrained. He strode out from the crowd and leaped onto the stage. Underworld Provinces Branches DAO. Ask for guidance on this new student's strength. I want to see what kind of strength can make you say such arrogant words. Chapter 2796. Ming Yasi's expression was displeased, and he turned to look at a robust youth beside him. Who is that? This young man, who was also a senior student of the Underworld Region Branch, was called Turnbull. Although he did not understand what was going on when he saw that His Highness was unhappy, he still said respectfully, His name is Dao. He is an extremely talented clansman from the D family's branch. Ming Yasi glanced coldly at Dao on the platform and asked in a bad mood, "Who allowed him to go up? Running over to find trouble with a little girl to make his presence known?" Ming Yasi thought that the little girl already disliked him to begin with. She wouldn't mistakenly think that he was the one who let that idiot go up to challenge her, right? Would the little fellow dislike him even more because of this? While Ming Yasi was endlessly criticizing, Turnbull's expression was a bit puzzled. Although he hadn't interacted with His Highness for more than 2 days, he believed he had a good grasp of his temperament. This was an extremely arrogant and difficult person to get along with. Yet today, he was actually asking him why Dao went up to challenge her? Shouldn't he challenge her? That little girl was slapping the faces of all the senior students of the 3 branches in the academy. A freshman little girl dared to be so arrogant. It would be strange if no one went up to challenge her. "Tell him to come down," Ming Yasi said coldly. The more he thought about it, the more likely this was. He absolutely couldn't let the little girl misunderstand him. Ali, who was standing beside him, couldn't resist sneaking a glance at his elder brother. He hastily cleared his throat and shouted, "Dao, come down." His voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough for all the students to hear him clearly. Akir had previously been surrounded and complimented by a group of new students, so when the instructors asked her to line up, she was escorted to the front of the new students. At this time, she was still some distance away from Ali and Yasi, who were mixed in the back of the crowd. Now that she heard Ali say this, she couldn't help but secretly grit her teeth and look up at the little stoic on the platform. Without a doubt, Big Brother Yasi had instructed Ali to shout this. What was so good about that stoic girl that she kept calling Big Brother Yasi on her mind all day? Dao, who had just stood in front of the little stoic and didn't have time to speak, was involuntarily taken aback when he heard Alex's words, and he turned to look at the crowd. Turnbull was afraid that Dao's honest nature would act up again, so he hurriedly called out, "Dao, His Highness asked you to come down." With that said, how could Dao not understand? So it was His Highness Doc Yas who told him to go down. Although, he was a little cowardly. He had just jumped onto the high platform and rolled down with his tail between his legs. It was really a little embarrassing. However, His Highness Yas had even defeated the former Crown Prince, His Highness Underworld Wolf. What a joke. He was just a disciple of a small branch of the D family, so he naturally could not openly challenge His Highness ACI. Therefore, Dao, who had been on the stage for less than 2 seconds, jumped off the stage with his tail between his legs. The little stoic was already prepared for battle and was about to summon her feral. The other party suddenly said that he didn't want to fight, and then rolled down by himself. This was simply inexplicable. Crazy. The stoic man muttered to himself. The few instructors who were closer to her couldn't help but twitch their mouths when they heard this. Ha 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 ha. I didn't expect that someone from Great Ming Province would also cower. A mocking laugh came from outside the crowd. A figure flashed and scuttled onto the high platform with a whoosh. Chapter 2797. This person's outfit was even more unsightly than the tiger skin outfit from before. His hair was disheveled, his entire body stinked, and his fat belly was exposed. His feet were bare, and the soles of his feet were covered in a layer of 3 feet of dirt. Darling Chow hurriedly took a step back, and her eyes widened. Get lost. Stinky thing. It's unbearably stinky. All the teachers were speechless as their mouths twitched. That man immediately flew into a rage and shouted sternly, "This little girl is really arrogant and conceited. Today, let me teach you how to be a person." Aber didn't wait for him to fly over, and his figure immediately flashed and hid behind Principal Yun. He angrily glared at the principal. What kind of Imperial Academy is this? You're picking up trash from the academy. Can just anyone enter this Imperial Academy? The students don't even have a uniform. One moment there was a tiger skin man, and the next moment there was a stinky beggar wearing only a pair of underpants. It simply made people speechless. Of course we do, the principal said with an aggrieved face. It's just that here, we don't require everyone to buy the academy uniform. It's all for people to do what they can. Some people, after entering the academy for several years, still haven't saved enough money to buy a set of academy uniform. This time, it was Arbor's turn to be dumbstruck. How much is your academy uniform? This time, there was no need for Principal Yun Piaomiao to reply. The teacher from before spoke again with an indifferent expression, 100,000 spirit coins. Why don't you just rob? The entire academy sky was filled with the little girl's angry roar. All the students instantly felt that the little girl's roar was simply what everyone was thinking. You can't say it like that. Our academy uniform isn't some simple clothing. It's a defensive spiritual clothing. It can effectively block 100 full-powered attacks from a spirit master below level 10. You definitely won't lose out to your little girl. Why don't you buy one? Let me tell you, if you want to enter the heaven ranking and earth ranking, you must wear this academy uniform. This is also for the fairness of the competition. Is your team made up of 9 people or 10 people? Give me a set of all of them. What was happening? Wasn't this the freshman entrance assembly? Why did their principal Yun suddenly start promoting? Everyone looked at Yun Piaomiao with a dumbfounded expression. The instructors could not bear to look at it. One of the consecrators coughed softly and went forward to tug at Dean Yun's sleeve. Only then did Dean Yun put away his promotional expression and chuckled. Oh, where were we just now? Brat, do you think you'll be fine just because you're hiding behind the dean? Today, let me teach you how to behave. A smelly bug dares to boast that it wants to teach me how to behave. The repeated provocations made Arbor fly into a rage. His voice was extremely cold as he said, "Kill him." There was an uproar among the crowd of students below. They all recognized the person who jumped onto the stage. He was from the barbarian tribe and did not belong to any of the 3 big schools. He was not weak and was also a senior student of the royal school. And now, the stoic-faced little girl actually said, "Kill him." Wasn't she a bit too arrogant? In the blink of an eye, as soon as the little girl finished speaking, a giant sand scorpion taller and stronger than a hill suddenly appeared behind the little fellow and quickly crawled over with rustling movements. A pair of large, sturdy pincers abruptly pierced toward that person. Chapter 2798. This sturdy sand scorpion waved its 2 large pincers and rapidly spun like a top. With a flick of its tail, it released its hidden stingers with a whoosh. This round of attack was fast, ferocious, and wild. It was simply ecstatic. Almost all the mentors were dumbfounded. With a loud boom, the entire stage collapsed from the sturdy sand scorpion's stomp. Everyone took advantage of the momentum and landed in front of the crowd. Principal Yun opened his mouth and raised his hand to say, "Have mercy." That sand scorpion swung its large black tail and sent that underpants man flying. It swiftly crawled forward and used its large pincers to clamp down on the underpants man. The other party didn't even have the slightest chance to retaliate before he was pressed to the ground. Its stinger was raised high, and a poisonous needle was about to pierce that underpants man's thigh. Principal Yun quickly flew over and used a wisp of sacred energy to land on the sand scorpion's pincers, causing it to retract its stinger in pain. The underpants man took advantage of the situation to roll out from under the scorpion. His face was ghastly pale as he shouted loudly. After cursing in a tribal dialect that no one understood, he hastily circulated a wisp of spiritual energy and struck the sand scorpion's weak abdomen. Hiss, hiss. The sand scorpion was hit and crawled back 2 steps in pain. The underpants man was abruptly struck down by a bolt of lightning. Sir Jojo was thoroughly enraged. He flew up into the air, and hundreds of thunder spirit talismans floated around him. Yun Piaomiao, you think you can save him by helping him? Even heavenly law can't stop the people I, Arbor, want to kill. Let alone you. His shout silenced the entire venue. After Yun Piaomiao and the mentors recovered from their shock, they wanted to stop him. However, at this time, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, Qi Xianxian, Little Fatty, Lu Yu, and the others also flew over and blocked the mentors. Since it's a spa between students, isn't it a bit unreasonable for the mentors to make a move? Mo Lien sneered. Whoever dares to help today will be making an enemy of our divine province. You want to bully me with numbers? If you want to fight, come find us. Little Fatty raised his arms and said indifferently. Yun Piao Miao was completely speechless. No, I'm not helping. That. Didn't you say that I'm helping you? Are you bullying Jojo because no one can help you? Qi Xianxian angrily interrupted Principal Yun's words. Her small face turned ruthless as she said, Are you all blind? Just who is provoking who? Who is rushing out to court death? Can't you see? That rigid reverend from the abstinence courtyard was so angry that he was about to explode. All of you are ignoring the academy's rules. You don't want to continue studying here, do you? Duan Yu snorted. With such an indiscriminate academy, it doesn't matter whether I study or not. Chapter 2799. What kind of person could withstand several hundred spirit thunder talismans? The students below shuddered one after another. They uniformly looked at the little stoic girl as if they were looking at a monster, and they involuntarily took a few steps back. Especially Dao, who had courted disaster by jumping onto the stage but was called down by Yasi. He was practically shedding tears of gratitude as he looked at His Highness. His Highness deserved to be His Highness. After careful deliberation, he naturally came up with a plan. If His Highness hadn't told him to get down, the unlucky guy who was attacked by the sand scorpions and bombarded by hundreds of lightning bolts on the stage would be him, Dao. Thank you, His Highness. Thank you, Underworld Province's God Punisher. The heavens still protected him, Dao. At this point, in the hearts of all the students at the Imperial Academy, the lofty image of the terrifying little stoic murderous star, Nouveau Riche Little Stoic, and the little stoic who opened a talisman shop at home had been thoroughly established. Several of Dao's good friends stepped forward and patted his shoulders comfortingly, exchanging rueful glances with him. Fortunately, we have the wise and mighty His Highness, so we won't be like that big idiot from the barbarian tribe and provoke this murderous star. The Sun Moon Temple's Holy Sun has graced us with his presence to pay a visit to the Imperial Academy's Dean Yun Piaomiao. Following the sound of an ethereal female voice, melodious stringed and woodwind music entered everyone's ears. In the distant sky, a dozen red-crowned cranes with long white feathers could be seen flying unhurriedly toward the academy amidst layers of clouds. Rose petals, which were surrounded by a fragrance, fell down layer by layer. Several dozen fairy-like flower children cleared the path, scattering petals all over the sky. Behind them followed a luxurious sedan carried by 16 brawny men. The sedan flew through the air and headed toward the students. Abba's hand paused slightly, and a faint trace of disgust surfaced in his heart. This Sun Moon Temple style was truly quite disgusting. Whether it was that saintess from before or this holy sun, they were all extravagant as soon as they appeared. Every time they appeared, they would be swarmed by crowds of people, as if they were afraid others wouldn't know their noble identities. They were just going out, so why were they so particular? The moment Abba's hand paused, the lightning in the sky also retracted slightly. The sedan of 16 people had already arrived above everyone's heads. At this moment, a surge of energy surged from the carriage towards Sir Jojo. This power was surging and abnormally fierce. If this attack hit, even if Jojo didn't die, he would definitely lose half his life. Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others all turned serious, and they swiftly shot towards Abba's side. When Abba sensed that something was wrong, he decisively covered himself with an eggshell defensive barrier. At this critical moment, a red figure suddenly appeared beside Lord Xiqiao. Reaching out, the figure grabbed Xiqiao and carried her away. With a flick of his sleeve, the surging power was suddenly blocked, and all of it was repelled with a thunderous force. Bang! A ferocious force landed on the carriage. How could the 16 burly men who were carrying the carriage resist? In an instant, they were scattered by this force and fell to the ground. At the same time, the carriage was completely shattered by the force. After a loud bang, a white figure scuttled out from between the muslin curtains. He coughed to suppress his astonishment. The other party's cultivation was actually a level higher than his. He was already a spiritual venerable, so could it be that the other party was actually an immortal venerable expert? At this moment, Emolien and Duan Yu had already arrived at Arber's side. Chapter 2800. Taking a closer look, the little fellow's stoic face was expressionless, and her body was wrapped in a transparent eggshell. She was being held in Hu Jinshan's arms, and that appearance was simply a bit comical. Emolien secretly suppressed the amusement in her heart and reached out to take the eggshell. The little fellow's entire body was wrapped in that eggshell, so she was just a sphere. It was hard to grab anywhere, so she could only hold her. She looked down at her appearance and expressionlessly undid the defensive barrier on her body before hopping off the ground. Duan Yu dared to bet his head that if anyone dared to laugh out loud, Sir Jojo would definitely take out a washboard to beat them up. Being interrupted by the Holy Sun inexplicably saved the life of that brat from the barbarian tribe. That guy was already at his last gasp from being struck by lightning and was silently dragged away by someone. When Arber looked back, the person had already run away, so he could only resentfully feed Sand Scorpion a pill and recall it back to Sha Ji planet. Other people only thought that the little girl recalled the spirit beast into her spirit beast space. Yun Piaomiao breathed a sigh of relief, but her expression darkened again. She coldly glared at the white-robed Holy Sun of the Sun Moon Temple who floated over. Holy Sun Mi Yen, you came from afar, so our academy should warmly welcome you. However, you suddenly attacked our academy's student. This is very unjustifiable. Holy Sun Mi Yen coldly swept a glance at Emolien, Duan Yu, and the others before his gaze finally landed on a grinning, tall man waving a small peach-pink fan. A sharp glint flashed through the depths of his eyes. This young man before him was actually a venerated immortal? How was this possible? In the entire divine province, the number of venerated immortals could be counted on one hand. When did such a young venerated immortal appear? Why didn't he know? Shouldn't a venerated immortal have ascended and left this place? Did something go wrong with the heavenly law's restrictions? Why wasn't this venerated immortal restrained by the heavenly law? If Hu Jinshan could hear this person's inner voice, she would definitely infuriate him to death and tell him without hesitation, "This venerated immortal has already come out of the Tower of Punishment, so what more do you want? Worst comes to worst, I'll just capture my true self and force my way in again." "It's a misunderstanding," Mayan said calmly, nodding apologetically at Dean Yun. Jojo tugged at Emolien's sleeve. Without another word, Prince Mo's eyes flashed fiercely, and a gust of wind from his fist, which was imbued with saint power, flew towards the Holy Sun's face. At the same time, Arber also raised his hand and threw hundreds of ice spikes at the saint. The son of Saint was caught off guard and dodged twice in a very embarrassing manner. He was able to easily dodge Arber's icicles, but he had to frown and take Emolien's punch seriously. He crossed his arms in front of him, thinking that the holy armor gauntlets on his arms would definitely be able to block his opponent's attack. He didn't expect that he would be knocked back a few steps by this fist wind. Only then did he take a deep breath to stabilize his body. His eyes were filled with unconcealable astonishment. Just as the son of Saint raised his head and was about to look at Emolien, he saw another gust of fierce saint power burrowing out from the side and pouncing at his face again. D***emenit. One shouldn't hit someone's face in a fight, but these people actually wanted to hit his face one by one. The son of Saint gritted his teeth and withstood Duan Yu's attack. In the next second, he saw a crafty saint power materialize into 5 fingers. Pa! He slapped his face. The little stoic was relieved. Before the son of Saint flared up, she said coldly, "This is also a misunderstanding." Chapter 2801. Holy Sun Mi Yen was extremely vexed, and a harsh glint flitted through his eyes. His gaze swept past Emolien, Duan Yu, and He Chen before finally landing on the cold-faced little stoic. His gaze was like a needle, filled with endless coldness and probing as it landed on the little fellow. Headmaster Yun frowned and stepped forward to block the students. His gaze met Holy Sun Mi Yan's indifferent gaze. May I know the reason for Holy Sun Mi Yan's sudden visit? This Holy Sun came today to convey a message to the Divine Province's Crown Prince. Holy Sun Mi Yan regained his usual calmness, as if the slap he had just received didn't exist. Recently, the temple's great divine priest inspected the rear mountain and found that the mystic realm might open. The mystic realm will probably open earlier this time. Holy Sun Mi Yan's gaze coldly landed on Prince Mo's face, staring at him to check his expression. However, he was soon disappointed. No emotion could be discerned from Prince Mo's face at all. This Holy Sun came to inform the two of you. I hope you can make some preparations in advance. Also, convey the great divine priest's message. Mi Yan lowered his eyes slightly and nodded at Headmaster Yun. The temple intends to provide 30 quotas to the Royal Academy for the opening of the Sun-Moon Mystic Realm this time. I hope Headmaster Yun can cooperate with our temple to select talents. As long as you obtain a jade tablet, you can enter the Mystic Realm with the Holy Nun and the temple's people to explore and search for treasures. Everyone can bring out a treasure from the Mystic Realm. The excess will be turned over to the temple. Yun Piaomiao couldn't help but be taken aback. The Sun-Moon Temple's Mystic Realm opened once every 10 years, and this wasn't the first time it opened. However, every time the Sun-Moon Mystic Realm opened in the past, the temple would send people to guard it strictly to prevent outsiders from sneaking in. Unexpectedly, they were so generous this time to open it to the Royal Academy? Oh, of course, this couldn't be considered generous. After entering the Mystic Realm, each Academy student could only take one item at most, and the excess would be turned over to the temple. However, it was already very good to be able to go in and have a look, gain experience, and obtain a handy treasure in passing. Benevolent smiles immediately appeared on the faces of the Academy's worshippers. They nodded and said, "Dean, this is a good thing." Dean Yun weighed the pros and cons and nodded. "This is indeed good news. Thank you, Holy Sun." Holy Sun Mi Yan nodded lightly. During the selection period, this Holy Sun intends to personally see the strength of this batch of students. I'm afraid I will have to stay here for a while. Sorry to trouble Dean Yun. Dean Yun nodded and called for 2 people to arrange accommodations for the deity's Templars people. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Then, he turned to look at Emolien and said, I'll stay with the Divine Prefecture Crown Prince. The Crown Prince's residence should be big enough to accommodate the people from the Divine Hall. How shameless! Qi Xian, Little Fatty, and the others cursed in their hearts. Without waiting for the Crown Prince to speak, the little stoic nodded. 100,000 a day's rent, absolutely no bargaining. Everyone staggered and almost fell to the ground. Didn't you just say that the dean was evil? Little miss, you're the #1, incomparably evil person in the world. A priest behind Mi Yan had long been unable to restrain the anger in his heart. When he heard the little stoic's words, he instantly flared up. What did you say? Chapter 2802. 200,000 spirit coins per day. If you want to stay, then stay. If you don't want to, scram. Arba threw down this sentence and pulled Emolien's hand, turning to leave. What? Just a second ago, you said there was no second price. But a second later, you freaking doubled the price. After taking a deep breath, Holy Sun Mi Yan said coldly, Pay up. That priest's jaw was about to fall off. Starting from 5 days. Pay up. Holy Sun Mi Yan forced these 2 words out from between his teeth. When he said the word, pay, he gritted his teeth and chewed on the word like he was chewing wax. She guessed that the anger in his heart was surging like an avalanche. How pitiful! He was actually angered to this extent by the little stoic. The priest trembled as he fished out a spirit coin card and shakily handed it to the little stoic. Arba calmly snatched it and directly threw it to the stoic-faced headmaster Yun. He said very heroically, Prepare 10 brand new sets of school uniforms. If there's even a single thread on them, refund me the money. 100,000 spirit coins for a set of uniforms. If there was even the slightest flaw, she would make this Yun Piaomiao suffer the consequences. Headmaster Yun shuddered and suddenly really wanted to go home to hug and cry with his elder brother. Big bro, how is this finding me a student? You're completely stuffing me with an ancestor. Emo Lien curled her lips in amusement and was led away by the little girl. Gather here at 7 a.m. tomorrow. At that time, I'll assign you new students a subject, Headmaster Yun hastily muttered. Seeing the two of them leave without looking back, he couldn't help but sigh. It looked like the academy was really going to be lively in the future. Qi Xianxian squeezed to Aber's side and glanced at the group of people from the Temple of the Gods following behind them. She lowered her voice and asked, Jojo, since you know these guys don't have good intentions, why the hell did you take them in? Are you afraid they'll cause trouble? The little stoic was still indignant. This holy son's cultivation was much higher than that holy nun from before. Just now, she had almost suffered a great loss in the hands of this person. If it weren't for He Chen's timely appearance and blocking for her, she might have been beaten to the point of vomiting blood. Can 1,000,000 spirit coins make up for it? Stop joking. They will suffer in the future. Lady Chow Chow winked at Qi Xianxian with her watery eyes. The two young ladies held hands and walked to the front, whispering something to each other. After Qi Xianxian heard Jojo's words, she felt extremely comfortable and giggled. That night, Holy Sun Mi Yen looked at his empty wing room and was so furious that his hair was about to explode. He knew that this girl was petty, but he didn't expect her to be so stingy. She actually only gave him a room, and there was nothing inside. You want a bed? All right, I'll pay you 100,000 spirit coins. A stool? 50,000. A teacup? 20,000 for one. Holy Sun Mi Yen takes things out of his inner world one by one. He has never been so aggrieved before. Fortunately, he had plenty of daily necessities in his inner world, which was enough to last him a few nights. Holy Sun, why did we have to come with them and live here? The two guards who were helping the Holy Sun spread out a mattress in the corner and couldn't bear to see the Holy Sun so aggrieved couldn't help but grumble. Naturally, it's to observe those two people from a close distance. Holy Sun Mi Yen said coldly, that crown prince isn't easy to deal with. Now, it seems that little witch is also difficult to deal with. Chapter 2803. No wonder the holy nun had suffered such a huge loss in their hands. Even he could not gain any advantage in the hands of these people, not to mention the holy nun, Nie Yaoguang. Thinking of that icy expressionless face, the holy nun Mi Yan's eyes could not help but turn cold. He still had to give this little girl a special gift at the division ceremony tomorrow. The night passed without a word. Aba's group had a good night's sleep and woke up energetically at 5 in the morning. The voice of the school administrator came from outside. He brought in a few large boxes and placed them in the courtyard. 10 sets of school uniforms, please accept them. Mata walked forward and opened each box to take a look. There were 2 to 3 sets of school uniforms in each box. They were pure white and had a spherical multicolored flower embroidered on the collar and chest area. Aba felt that this flower was extremely familiar. Taking a closer look, wasn't this the longevity flower? So, the royal school's flower was the longevity flower? Could it be that there was a longevity tree planted in the royal school? Aba's thoughts turned slightly, but she was still somewhat uncertain. The longevity tree's growing environment was extremely harsh. It would not bloom unless it was in the Shen domain or bear fruit unless it was in the God domain. She had raised the longevity tree on Paradise Planet for so long, but it still could not bear fruit in the spirit domain. The main reason was that the environmental conditions were not up to standard. According to Little Tree, it would probably only bear fruit after Paradise Planet ascended to the God domain. And ascending to the God domain, Aba could not help but sigh when she thought of this. It was still too early. Her cultivation was only a level 11 great spiritual master. She was still very far from the true God domain cultivation. Take it slow, everything was not something that could be obtained by force. Qiao Mu had everyone carefully inspect their respective school uniforms. Zhang Ping flipped them over and over for a look, causing the steward who was delivering the school uniforms to the side to be at a loss for words. After everyone checked carefully, they put on their white school uniforms. This defensive spiritual clothing was indeed a priceless treasure that cost 100,000 spirit coins per set. As soon as they put it on, it automatically adjusted the width and length according to their respective figures. It was very fitting on their bodies, as if it was a second layer of skin that could breathe. It was extremely comfortable to wear. Jojo nodded in satisfaction. Not bad. The steward who delivered the uniform couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Before this, the principal had already instructed him to check the academy uniform that was sent over thoroughly. Not even a single thread could be found. These new students were really fussy. The steward wiped his sweat and led a few guards out. The people of Arbor were wearing white school uniforms. When they were sitting in the side hall and having dinner, they saw Holy Sun Mi Yen come over with a gloomy face with a dozen of his priests and guards. The little fatty almost choked on the porridge in his mouth. Everyone knew about what happened last night. The little girl gave Holy Sun Mi Yen and his group 3 rooms in total, but each room was unfurnished. The room was completely empty. It would be extremely difficult to even find a bed or a blanket, let alone any other furniture or furnishings. No, there was nothing. It must have been hard on Holy Sun Mi Yen and his group. They had to make do with sleeping on the floor for the whole night. At this moment, they all had panda eyes and looked listless. It was obvious that they did not sleep well. Mi Yen and his group were glaring at Arbor and his group. This was simply not a day for humans. The priests were silently criticizing in their hearts. Chapter 2804. Usually, when they were patrolling the Sun Moon Temple, they were always the center of attention and respected by everyone. How dare the crown prince of the divine land and his people neglect them like this? Qiao Mu and the others were currently eating breakfast around an 8-seater table. Looking back, Qi Xianxian almost laughed out loud. A priest took out a slightly old-school desk from his inner world with a dark face, placed a bench in front of the table, and invited the Holy Sun to sit down. She didn't know from which shabby warehouse in the academy this guy stole such an old desk and chair to make up the number. Although the Holy Sun's handsome face was also dark, he still sat down. Soon, the priest placed a set of bowls and chopsticks, and a guard came in with a pot of hot porridge and a few dishes. As a spiritual venerable, it didn't matter whether he ate or not. It was just that this Holy Sun had a habit of eating twice in the morning and at noon, unless he was in seclusion for cultivation. The meal was prepared by the 2 priests in the room. Holy Sun Mi Yen ate a few mouthfuls, and put down the spoon with some grievance in his heart. He couldn't eat any more. The main reason was that he was sitting in front of an old desk, surrounded by a group of onlookers. He was used to being arrogant and had never been ridiculed like this. Under such gazes, he was naturally dissatisfied. Holy Sun Mi Yen threw down the chopsticks angrily, stood up, and walked out first. Seeing that their master was in a bad mood, the priests and guards didn't dare to say anything, and hurriedly followed him out. Mi Yen sneered in his heart, "I'll let you be happy for a while, and you'll be in for a good show later." When Arbor and the others arrived at the practice field yesterday, there were already many old and new students lined up there, waiting for the mentors to come. Upon seeing Qiao Mu's appearance, many people retreated to the sides in terror, and a rather spacious path actually appeared in the center. It was as if Miss Qiao was some kind of scourge. Everyone looked at her cautiously. Qi Xianxian stared at those people one by one, and thought, "Our Jojo is not a beast that goes berserk everywhere. If you don't provoke her, nothing will happen." "Morning, Jojo." Eldest young Sir Qin walked over from the crowd and waved at Arbor with a smile. Arbor looked up at him and saw Omega Kotoku standing beside him, looking at her with an unreadable expression. Mo Lien immediately sensed Sir Qiao Qiao's grip on his hand tighten slightly. He furrowed his brows and reached out to hold her hand gently. Looking at the group of people in front of them, he said coldly, "Make way." Eldest young Sir Qin pursed his lips and shuffled slightly to the side. Aber and Emolien walked to the front of the group and found an empty space to stand. The group of senior students couldn't help but sneak glances at them, secretly sizing them up. Dean Yoon led a group of consecrators and tutors to the practice field very quickly. Looking at the group of energetic students below, he nodded with a smile and said, "Today's main purpose is to help the new students divide the subjects." During the test, everyone had been tested according to the contents of the invitation letter. For example, the alchemists were naturally tested for pill refinement, and the artificers were tested for weapon forging. Most of them were naturally cultivators. The cultivators' test was the simplest, they just had to pass the corresponding test steels. Chapter 2805. For the pure cultivation subject, all 322 new students this year will be led by Instructor Ma and Instructor Gao. Those whose names are being read, please stand behind the two instructors. Forging branch, 21 new students this year will be led by Instructor Zhang. Pill branch, 33 new students will be led by Instructor Zheng from now on. Talisman branch, 5 new students will be led by Instructor Zhang. Concealed weapons branch, 59 new students. Zither branch, led by calligraphy and painting. Aber dozed off as he listened. After the two instructors helped Dean Yoon read everyone's names, 2 hours had passed, and the school subject assignment finally ended. The little fellow stood alone in front of the new students. She looked left and right with a baffled expression. Why was she the only one who hadn't found a group? Just now, Emolien had also been called to stand at the forging branch. She was the only one who hadn't been claimed. The entire practice field was silent. At this moment, everyone's gazes were on Aber. On the large practice field, all the students were lined up according to their assigned subjects. Both the new and old students were lined up in order. Our dear Qiao Mu's small face instantly darkened. Qi Xianxian and company, who had long been herded into the new students group, couldn't help but facepalm. Seriously, he didn't know what had happened again. Why did he leave their little stoic behind? One of the accompanying instructors quickly poked Dean Yoon, indicating for him to quickly look at the little stoic's expression. This stoic face looked like she was about to explode. Only then did Dean Yoon realize what was going on. He looked at the little girl with a chuckle and said, "Student Qiao, which subject do you want to study in? You can choose the Cultivation Hall, Pill Hall, or Talisman Hall." It was evident that this Dean Yoon already had a thorough understanding of the little stoic situation. He knew that she wasn't only a cultivator with outstanding talent, but she was also an alchemist and talisman practitioner. The little fellow's foul expression improved slightly, and she cast a glance in her husband's direction. Her husband was enthusiastically dragged over by the weapon forging hall's instructors. She didn't have any talent in weapon forging, so she naturally couldn't follow along. Emolien also felt unbearably vexed. He had originally already started walking towards the cultivation hall. But he didn't expect to be stopped by this instructor Zhang halfway. After a series of exaggerated explanations, he was led to the refining hall in a daze. However, the royal school was also quite interesting. He rarely revealed his talent in refining in front of others, so he didn't know where they found out about this. Of course he wanted to go to the cultivation hall with his wife, but now, when Instructor Zhang saw him move, he immediately ran up to him and stared at him, earnestly advising him. If he were to stay in the refining hall, he would be able to take part in the cultivation hall as a subsidiary subject. In the future, he would be able to participate in the Heaven Yuan ranking competition. There were many benefits to staying in the weapon refining hall. Every month, he could even obtain a lot of forging materials. Hearing this, Crown Prince Mo's head swelled again. He felt that this mentor probably hadn't talked to anyone for several hundred years, so she was terribly talkative. Because of this delay, the little stoic decisively chose the cultivation hall. The reason was very simple. Emolien went to the weapon forging branch, Duan Yu went to the concealed weapons branch, and the Qin Estates people basically stayed in the pill hall, so she definitely wouldn't go to the pill hall. There probably wasn't much to learn in a place like the Talisman Hall. She already had the complete talisman technique, the golden talisman jade tome, so she naturally didn't need anything else. Also, wait. Chapter 28:06. Therefore, after picking and choosing, she felt that the cultivation hall was the most perfect one. In the future, she would be able to train, have fun, with her friends again. Arbor expressionlessly walked towards the cultivation hall freshmen. Everyone retreated to the sides, their gazes filled with respect. What a joke! They didn't want to provoke a fellow who could summon a giant sand scorpion at any time. Xiao Mu disapproved of their attitude, and she ran to stand beside her teammates, the little fatty, and the others. Qi Xuanxuan's face was filled with joy as she pulled Arbor's hand and said, "That's great, we can train and play together again." The word play at the end was probably the main point, little fatty and the rest added in their hearts. Arbor nodded his head, his large watery eyes curving. Just as he was about to say something, a loud voice resounded throughout the entire training grounds. "I heard that there are many new symbol masters in the academy. I, Jin Zhaoyang, would like to challenge them. I wonder who dares to accept my challenge." Holy Sun Mi Yen stood beside the dean. When he heard this voice, the corners of his mouth curled up into a casual smile. "Here it comes." Principal Yun frowned and immediately rejected. "Today is not the day of the sparring session. If you want to spar, wait for another day." "Principal, I am very much looking forward to seeing the outstanding performance of these new students. Don't you all want to see the strength of these new symbol masters?" The man named Jin Zhaoyang flashed and arrived in front of the crowd. Duan Muqing glanced at that person and said indifferently, "This person looks young, but he should be in his early 50s. Arbor's and Qi Xuanxuan's jaws almost dropped to the ground. "He hasn't graduated at the age of 50? Little Fatty pursed his lips and said, "Maybe he just entered the academy not long ago. After all, the Imperial Academy doesn't have an age limit when it comes to recruiting talents." The two little girls thought about it and nodded at each other. "Jojo, you have to be careful. I'm afraid this person is coming for you." Duan Muqing saw that Jin Zhaoyang's gaze was sweeping towards them and said coldly. Lu Yu rubbed his chin. "I think we should be careful of this Jin Zhaoyang. I heard that among the new talisman masters, there are 2 talisman masters from the talisman aristocratic families of the Divine Prefecture." Jin Zhaoyang laughed and said, "I wonder where these 2 talisman masters are." Mu Roxuan did not expect that this fire would actually burn her. She could not help but be slightly stunned. Pursing her lips, she lightly moved her feet and walked out of the crowd. "I'm Mu Roxuan. Greetings, senior brother." "Ha ha ha ha." Jin Zhaoyang nodded repeatedly. Good, good. He was courageous, but what about his strength? "Little junior sister, let's set the limit at 3 offensive talismans. If you can withstand 3 of my offensive talismans, then it's your win." Senior brother Jin Zhaoyang was originally from the Tsong Prefecture and came from the Tsong Prefecture's talisman Qi clan. Later on, for some unknown reason, he fell out with the Tsong Prefecture's Qi clan and left the clan. Until now, he has been alone. Someone at the side relished in talking about Jin Zhaoyang and shared the gossip he had obtained with others. Immediately, it attracted many people's attention. Senior brother Jin Zhaoyang seems to have broken through the yellow rank Great Talisman Master proficiency level and reached the yellow rank Great Talisman Master perfection stage. When this was said, the surrounding people were in an uproar and exclaimed in surprise. Chapter 28:07. In everyone's opinion, a perfected yellow rank Great Talisman Master in her early 50s had a limitless future. However, when Mu Roxuan made her move, everyone marveled at the fact that this young lady was actually able to take on 2 consecutive powerful attack talismans from a yellow rank Great Talisman Master. Mu Roxuan pursed her lips, her face as dark as water. The defensive talisman array around her was made up of 24 jade talismans, emitting a faint jade luster. Defensive jade talisman array. As expected of the Mu family's eldest miss. A jade talisman array right off the bat. Opposite her, Jin Zhaoyang smiled at Mu Rochuan. Junior sister, you didn't draw this defensive jade talisman array yourself. Even if you barely beat me, it's still an unfair victory. Zhongli Ziyi frowned slightly and said indifferently, Senior brother Jin, you're already 50 years old. Bullying a 17-year-old junior sister doesn't seem so honorable. Jin Zhaoyang's face darkened. Snickers sounded from the surroundings. Mu Rochuan cast a grateful look at Zhongli Ziyi. When she turned to face Jin Zhaoyang, she focused all her attention on dealing with him. She was only a mid-stage black rank great talisman master and was far from perfected black rank. She definitely wouldn't be able to take on the opponent's attack talismans. Therefore, the defensive jade talisman array she was using right now was made by 7th Uncle Mu Jingrui. However, she had used this jade talisman array many times before. She didn't know if it could block Jin Zhaoyang's attack talismans, which were getting stronger and stronger each time. Junior sister, this is the last attack. Pay attention. Jin Zhaoyang smiled smugly and suddenly waved his right hand. A jade talisman flew toward Mu Rochuan at lightning speed and arrived in front of her with a whoosh. The light from the attack shone brightly. Mu Rochuan was knocked back more than 10 meters by the attack. Her feet dragged out 2 long white marks on the ground as she coughed and spat out a small mouthful of blood. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, but her eyes were filled with an unyielding gaze. Her body stiffened as she stood firmly. In less than 3 seconds, he spat out another mouthful of blood. Mu Xingchen leaped in front of her and hurriedly reached out to support her. He turned around and coldly looked at Jin Zhaoyang, saying in a deep voice, Surname Jin, if you want to compete, just come at me. Bullying a new student, what kind of hero are you? When everyone saw that Mu Rochuan was beaten to the point of vomiting blood, a trace of sympathy immediately appeared in their eyes. This Jin Zhaoyang was going too far. Moreover, Mu Rochuan herself was not weak. She was able to withstand 2 of Jin Zhaoyang's attacks at such a young age. It was not easy for Mu Rochuan to stand up straight under such a fierce attack for the 3rd time. Compared to Jin Zhaoyang's pressing step by step, Miss Mu seemed to have the demeanor of a large sect. It was a glorious defeat. Jin Zhaoyang forced a smile and said, Senior brother Mu, you're not thinking of standing up for your younger sister, are you? Why not? Mu Xingchen sneered. As a member of the Mu family, how could he be a coward who could watch outsiders bully his Mu family? Big brother. Mu Rochuan pressed his hand, coughed a few times, and pulled him back. She was not as skilled as him, so she had to admit defeat. A complicated light flashed through Mu Rochuan's eyes. Being slapped in the face on the first day of school was tantamount to ringing an alarm bell in her ears. In the past, when they competed in the family, others did not dare to kill her because of her status. Chapter 2808. However, that didn't mean that there wasn't anyone in the younger generation who could defeat her. Perhaps there was always someone better out there. There were also some hidden talents in the family who might not necessarily be inferior to her. She had been too arrogant in the past. Cough, cough, cough. Mu Rochuan looked coldly at Jin Zhaoyang. At this moment, there was a subtle change in her state of mind. With Mu Xingchen's support, Mu Rochuan straightened her back and wiped the blood from her mouth with her sleeve. I lost. She sneered. But when I'm 50, I might not lose to you. Everyone was stunned and couldn't help but snicker. Wasn't that right? Miss Mu had just turned 17 and already had the ability to fight Jin Zhaoyang. In another 30 years or so, with Miss Mu's talisman aptitude, she would most likely surpass Jin Zhaoyang and crush him. Jin Zhaoyang's face darkened again. His mouth twitched, and he said with a fake smile, I heard that a heaven-level great talisman master appeared in your Mu family in the past 300 years. A hint of anger appeared in Mu Xingchen's eyes. Jin Zhaoyang chuckled. I heard his name is Mu Zhaoyang, your patriarch Zhaoyang. Ha ha ha, I'm Jin Zhaoyang, and he's Mu Zhaoyang. Do you think I'll be like your patriarch Zhaoyang in the future, with a bright future that can't be underestimated? Ha ha ha. How dare you? Mu Rochuan trembled with anger. This person actually verbally took advantage of their Mu family. How dare he dream of being on par with their patriarch Zhaoyang with his cowardly appearance? How preposterous! Jin Zhaoyang waved his hand and said with a smile, "Eh? I heard that your Mu family has 2 new students entering the school this year. Why don't I see the other one? Could it be that he's too scared to come out?" The young masters from the Qin estate, the 2 from the Dou family, and the disciples from the aristocratic families of the divine province couldn't help but roll their eyes at the same time. Here it comes again. It hasn't even been 2 minutes, and he's courting death again. The scene of the little girl releasing the sand scorpion yesterday was still floating in front of their eyes. Today, there's someone courting death again. The group of students silently took a few steps back, leaving a large circle in the middle to let Jin Zhaoyang's heart's desire. They didn't want the innocent to be implicated. Aba frowned and walked to Mu Xingchen and Mu Rochuan's side. He stared at Jin Zhaoyang with a bone-chilling gaze. "Why are you being so long-winded?" From the very beginning, this person had been noisy to no end. Aba expressed that her patience had long since run out. Jin Zhaoyang's face was cold as he stared at the little girl who was like a jade statue. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he once again revealed that infuriating smile. "You're the other newly admitted Mu clan disciple?" Aba didn't deny it or admit it. He just looked at him coldly and asked, "Do you want to die?" Everyone was speechless. Jin Zhaoyang clearly didn't understand his current situation. He frowned and said with displeasure, "Little girl, please be more polite." "You don't have to be polite to a dog of the Sun Moon Temple." As soon as these words came out, the entire crowd couldn't help but go into an uproar. Everyone's gaze shifted to the Holy Sun, who was standing silently at the side. Holy Sun Mi Yen was obviously slightly taken aback, and then he said coldly, "You probably misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand." Aba interrupted the Holy Sun without allowing him to explain. Chapter 2809. The little fellow said indifferently, "This dog of yours knows how to look at its master's face the moment it appears. In the process of fighting with Mu Rochuan, it looked at your master's face 3 times in a row. Since you were targeting me from the beginning, why use the Mu clan's name?" The little girl mocked impolitely, "Don't you know my relationship with the Mu clan? Why use the Mu clan as a fig leaf? Then come at me, be a bit more open and aboveboard." When the little girl retorted, she was used to firing off a torrent, sweeping away her usual quiet appearance. Prince Emo was very happy to see this. The little girl was so energetic. But as the one being rebuked, he was so depressed that he wanted to die. Holy Sun Mi Yan's expression was already extremely ugly as he coldly swept a glance at a priest beside him. That priest hurriedly stepped forward and explained in a deep voice, "Little girl, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. This is a private matter between your Imperial Academy students. Why drag our Sun Moon Temple into it? Whether it is or not, you know in your heart." Aba raised his hand to interrupt him and turned to look at Jin Zhaoyang. "You're called Jin Zhaoyang?" "That's right." Jin Zhaoyang raised his chin high, his face insufferably arrogant. "Do you think your bug-like appearance is comparable to old ancestor Zhaoyang?" "Bug-like appearance?" Jin Zhaoyang glared at Aba in annoyance, his face instantly turning green. This little girl had guts, actually calling him a bug-like appearance? Aba didn't give him a chance to question and just continued with a sneer, "Don't you know what kind of person Mu Zhaoyang is? The talisman array drawn by old ancestor Zhaoyang 300 years ago can still be used today. Can you do it? You know what kind of bug-like appearance you are. You're obviously a bug, yet you want to be shoulder to shoulder with the sun. Simply ridiculous. You have no self-awareness." Jin Zhaoyang was so angry that his hair stood on end. Good. Good. If he didn't teach this audacious girl a lesson today, how could he continue to establish himself in the Imperial Academy? What's so good about it? Aba looked at Jin Zhaoyang as if he was looking at an idiot. His cold gaze swept across Jin Zhaoyang's swollen face. With a slight movement of her finger, a jade talisman with flowing light appeared in her slender white palm. The little girl said expressionlessly, "If you can take this jade talisman of mine, then I will give it to you. Take it as my loss." Arbor said coldly, "If you can't take it, then immediately change your name to Golden Dog and get out of the royal school. Do you dare to bet?" Jin Xiaoyang was so angry that he clenched his fists and shouted angrily, You, ha 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 ha. How arrogant. Just by relying on an offensive jade talisman, he was trying in vain to make a yellow-ranked great talisman master like him unable to receive it? Ha 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 ha. What a joke. Little girl, the world doesn't revolve around you. Of course the world doesn't revolve around me, Arbor said coldly. There's always someone better than you. Even a 3-year-old child knows this. But against you. Arbor looked down indifferently at the jade talisman in her hand and coldly spat out 3 words. Enough. You. Jin Xiaoyang shouted angrily. Good. Today, if I can't take this offensive jade talisman of yours, my name Jin Xiaoyang will be read backwards from now on. Yang Xiao Jin. Arbor nodded. That's a phrase, remember it. Chapter 28:10. Jin Xiaoyang's expression was extremely unsightly. Today's matter had turned out like this. It could not be considered amicable. A trace of murderous intent flitted across his eyes. What if I accept? I don't want your apology, I want your right hand. Do you dare to bet? Jin Xiaoyang's eyes were full of provocation, anticipating that the little girl would not dare to accept this bet. How dare you? Yun Piaomiao angrily rebuked. A trace of mockery flashed across Mo Lian's eyes, and she said faintly, Din Yun, don't worry. He won't be able to jump around for long. Din Yun was really anxious. He knew Jin Xiaoyang's strength very well. At the little girl's age and coming up from the lower realm, it was already not bad for her to reach the advanced level perfected talisman master level that Mu Jingrui had mentioned. This wager with one hand was no joke. How would a talisman master draw talismans in the future if he lost a hand? These young children were too impulsive. If it was a normal competition of cultivation, even if the little girl's cultivation was insufficient, she would not lose to Jin Xiaoyang by too much with Sand Scorpion's help. But now, it was a competition of talisman power. Mu Rochuan could become a yellow-level talisman master at the age of 17 because she had an innate advantage, and the entire talisman family in the Divine Continent had contributed greatly to her cultivation. But the little girl was someone who had just come up from the lower star region. It was hard to believe that she had the power to fight Jin Xiaoyang. Cut the crap, take it. How could Arbor have the patience to continue chattering with Jin Xiaoyang? She directly raised her white hand, and a jade-white stream of light flew towards Jin Xiaoyang. A cold sneer hung on Jin Xiaoyang's lips as he raised his hand and swept the air in front of him. 24 defensive jade talismans jumped out and emitted white light in front of him. They suddenly formed a circle, enveloping his entire person in a defensive jade talisman array. The talisman masters could see that a transparent barrier had been erected around Jin Xiaoyang. It was like a safety shield, enclosing him within it. Just with that offensive jade talisman? It was absolutely impossible to break through this yellow-level defensive jade talisman array. The talisman masters could not help but sigh and shake their heads. The little girl was too naive. How could an offensive jade talisman be enough to deal with a yellow-level perfected talisman master? Even if they formed an offensive jade talisman array, they might not be able to break through the opponent's defensive talisman array. The difference was too great. Boom! A deafening sound suddenly rang out, and even the ground here was trembling from the mighty force of the attack. Cough, cough, cough. Everyone waved their hands and brushed away the faint white mist in front of them. Surprisingly, Jin Xiaoyang was actually forced to retreat several steps by the power of the jade talisman. You've lost. Jin Xiaoyang glared angrily. He was secretly surprised. He didn't expect the little girl's offensive jade talisman to have such power. Fortunately, his defensive array glyphs were strong enough to resist the attack. As a result, clear cracks appeared on his talisman array. Jin Xiaoyang secretly heaved a sigh of relief. His face was saved. Next, he just needed to withstand the pressure and make this arrogant little girl cripple her own right arm. "You're too naive." Arba's cold voice entered his ears. Following that, an even more powerful wave of attacks rushed out from the Jade Talisman and landed on his body. "What?" Everyone looked at the Jade Talisman suspended in midair with shocked expressions. The third, fourth, and fifth wave of attacks broke through the wind and waves. Chapter 28:11. The rumbling sound of the impact was incessant. When blocking the second wave of attacks, Jin Xiaoyang barely managed to use the second set of backup defensive talisman arrays. Unfortunately, this set of defensive talisman arrays was obviously not as useful as the previous set of talisman arrays, and it was instantly destroyed by the attack talisman power. The talisman power hit his left shoulder, and Jin Xiaoyang's entire body swayed backward. When the third wave of attacks came, Jin Xiaoyang's expression changed greatly, and he could only activate the defensive ring on his body to block it. At this point, he had clearly lost. Since it was a talisman competition, he was obviously defeated now that he had used other aids. However, at that critical moment, he really couldn't care too much about saving his life. With great difficulty, he managed to block the attacks in a flurry. The fourth and fifth waves of attacks came majestically. For a moment, the entire practice field was silent, and even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone inexplicably held their breaths as they watched the scene before them, almost forgetting to speak. Mu Xingchen was especially shocked. As the saying went, the layman only watched the show, while the expert could see the knack. In the eyes of other laymen, they only felt waves of talisman power stronger than the previous wave, blowing strong winds from the side and landing heavily on Jin Xiaoyang's defensive barrier. And in the eyes of Mu Xingchen and Mu Roxuan, what they noticed even more was that the Jade Talisman that the little girl flicked out continuously released 5 waves of attacks. If in a real battle, throwing out such a number of Jade Talismans would be so terrifying that it would make one's hair stand on end. Mu Roxuan's eyes were wide open. She recalled the first time she saw the little girl in the corridor. She held a blue storage talisman in her hand, and even Ruyan coveted that blue talisman in her hand, wanting to take it for herself. Could it be that she really was a talisman master? But, was that possible? Mu Roxuan's expression turned somewhat ugly for a moment. She was somewhat unable to believe that a girl who grew up outside the Mu family would have better talisman skills than her. After all, the two of them didn't really compete at that time in the corridor. The result of the competition was left undecided in a ridiculous way. After that, Mu Roxuan subconsciously forgot about this matter, and was blindly excited as she drew a yellow storage talisman in the corridor. Because of this, she was even praised by her grandfather and admired by her family. Moreover, just like earlier, wasn't Auber not joining the talisman hall precisely because she was afraid of this genius talisman eldest young miss, and didn't want her edge to be overshadowed by her? She had always been confident in her talisman skills. He didn't expect to receive so many blows today. Moreover, watching Auber defeat Jin Xiaoyang was even more painful than losing to Jin Xiaoyang herself. After all, she didn't feel guilty about losing to Jin Xiaoyang. She was much younger than Jin Xiaoyang, so wasn't it normal for her to lose? And if Auber could easily defeat Jin Xiaoyang, how would others view her, the genius eldest young miss of a talisman aristocratic family? They would definitely say that she, the genius first miss of the Divine Land's talisman aristocratic family, was actually inferior to a little girl who had been wandering outside the Mu family for many years. Mu Roxuan's fingers curled up tightly. Her state of mind underwent a subtle change once again. She had always thought that at her age, there was basically no one who could match up to her in terms of talisman skills. But now, reality slapped her in the face. Someone had surpassed her, and was actually a year younger than her. Chapter 28:12. Just now, she felt that she couldn't be too arrogant and had to broaden her horizons. Among the younger generation of the family, there might be someone more outstanding than her, right? But this might not necessarily include Xiao Mu at all, alright? She simply could not accept that Xiao Mu had surpassed her, Mu Rochuan. It was much better for anyone to surpass her than Arbor. How could she allow Arbor to surpass her? Mu Rochuan seemed to see the disappointment in her parents' eyes when they looked at her. They had painstakingly nurtured a beautiful daughter who was already inferior to others in terms of looks. At this moment, even the talisman art that the family had always been proud of was far inferior to others. Mu Rochuan's face turned deathly pale from the huge blow she received. When she stole a glance at her brother beside her, she felt a piercing pain in her heart. At this moment, eldest brother's bright gaze was completely focused on Xiao Mu. In his eyes, there was only Arbor. That girl was his most outstanding younger sister. She had completely lost herself. Did this mean that in the future, her father, grandfather, uncles, and even everyone in the family would lose sight of her, Mu Rochuan, and only Arbor? Crack! An almost inaudible shattering sound made her heart sink. She instantly came back to her senses. Mu Rochuan lowered her eyes, her face slightly distorted. Just now, a crack had appeared in her Dantian's spiritual ruin realm. It actually caused the spiritual ruin realm to shatter because of the sudden impact on her mental state. Mu Rochuan felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Jin Xiaoyang's setback wasn't any better than hers. Jin Xiaoyang had never expected that he would lose. At this moment, he was still in a daze. He sat paralyzed on the ground, not knowing what had happened. The fourth wave of attacks had broken 2 ribs in his chest. How could he dare to resist the 5th wave of attacks? Although he had avoided it, the deep pit behind him repeatedly indicated that he had lost. He had lost. He had lost completely in front of everyone. He had lost all his dignity. He subconsciously looked in the direction of Holy Sun Mi Yen. The Holy Sun's handsome face was dark and gloomy. He pursed his lips tightly. Although he didn't say anything, the suppressed displeasure in his eyes was obvious. She originally wanted to find someone to slap her in the face and teach the stoic face a good lesson, but in the end, things completely went against her wishes. The little stoic coldly glanced at Jin Chaoyang and said dryly, "Yang Chao Jin, you must accept your loss. Get out of the Imperial Academy immediately." Yang Chao Jin. Everyone silently looked at Jin Chaoyang, who was paralyzed on the ground. The little girl immediately read the other party's name upside down. Alright, since he lost the bet, Jin Xiaoyang could only accept it. You don't go too far. Jin Xiaoyang's face darkened, and his lips trembled as he spoke. The little stoic immediately looked at Headmaster Yun impatiently. Why are all the students in your academy so unreasonable? He was the one who wanted to challenge me, and now he's the one who refuses to admit defeat. How can you have the face to be my classmate with such a vile character? Why aren't you telling him to get the hell out of my sight? If you continue to be long-winded, I'll kill you. The little stoic's patience was completely exhausted. Her black eyes coldly glanced at Jin Xiaoyang. Do you understand? Jin Xiaoyang shuddered, and his entire body quivered. He looked pleadingly at Headmaster Yun beside him. Headmaster Yun expressed that he wanted to help, but was unable to. Chapter 28:13. Headmaster Yun was truly powerless. From yesterday until today, how many jokes had he caused by challenging the little stoic? Could anyone with a discerning eye not tell? How awesome you thought you were earlier was how much of a slap to your face now. Didn't you see so many students looking at you with sympathetic gazes? You truly couldn't be stopped from courting death. Jin Xiaoyang saw the headmaster's strange gaze. He clearly didn't plan on helping him. He hesitated for a second before suddenly pointing at Arbor and shouting, "She cheated. Headmaster, she cheated. She definitely threw out 5 offensive jade talismans just now. Didn't everyone see it with their own eyes? Just now, I received 5 attacks. A total of 5. Jin Xiaoyang stretched out 5 fingers in a final struggle and jumped up to shout harshly. Cough, cough, cough. Because 2 of his ribs were broken, his lungs sucked in another burst of cold air from his shouting. It hurt so much that cold sweat dripped down his forehead, and he coughed violently. He could only slowly lower the speed and volume of his speech. As everyone knows, an offensive jade talisman can only release 1 attack, but just now, a frog at the bottom of a well, ignorant and ill-informed. Arbor coldly interrupted his noisy speech and swept him an indifferent glance. You haven't seen it before, he hasn't seen it before, and everyone hasn't seen it before, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist in this world. You should go and understand how big the world is. The little stoic angrily rebuked the old man in front of her. She didn't give him any face at all. This is a multi-attack jade talisman. The little stoic had always been too lazy to explain, but now, she felt the need to have a good talk with this ignorant and ill-informed fellow. With my current ability, I can only inscribe 5. But the ancestor Chao Yang you slandered previously, he once inscribed 7. 7-level offensive talismans. Have you heard of it? Everyone was stupefied. Everyone, including Mu Xingchen and Mu Roxuan, looked at the little lady in front of them as if they were listening to a fantasy story. How did you know? Mu Roxuan asked in a trembling voice. The tip of her heart started to tremble along with it. Could it be that the little girl had the opportunity to learn the art of talisman from old ancestor Zhao Yang? If that was the case, then her strange and unfathomable talisman technique would make sense. Arbor naturally wouldn't explain it to Mu Roxuan, because the topic that was brought up was a long time ago. The Holy Water sect's old sect master was Mu Zhaoyang's best friend despite their age difference. She had heard a lot about Mu Zhaoyang's life stories during their casual chats. However, at that time, she still didn't know that this old man was her ancestor. She only felt that this old man's natural disposition was heroic, candid, and magnanimous. Moreover, his talisman technique was superb, and his character and cultivation were extremely admirable. Just now, Jin Zhaoyang dared to slander and defame her idol. This was naturally intolerable. It wasn't that she had to stand up for Mu Roxuan. She did not care about what Mu Roxuan was like. It was just that no one dared to insult the idol that she had admired since she was young. Her small hand slid over the white jade bracelet engraved with green bamboo on her wrist. The talisman matrix that old ancestor Zhao Yang left behind at the Maple Pavilion 300 years ago helped the Holy Water sect preserve the entire Maple Pavilion during the 6 prefectures invasion. With such boldness and ability, he was not only a master of his generation, but also a grandmaster of his generation. How could Jin Zhaoyang, this stinking bug, be mentioned in the same breath as him? He wasn't even fit to carry his shoes. Chapter 28:14. Arbor looked coldly at Jin Zhaoyang, who was sitting on the ground. His gaze swept across Jin Zhaoyang's face. Do you think that a jade talisman can only be used for one purpose? Attack or defense? It was a big mistake. Ever since the 9th jade talisman of the Golden Talisman Jade Tome was activated, her actual talisman drawing skills had advanced from the black level complete circle to the earth level entry stage. A small yellow level talisman master jumping in front of her. Wasn't it just a matter of being slapped? Qiao Mu couldn't be bothered to continue speaking, so she turned around and stomped towards Emolian. Hurry and get out of here. That young Zhao Jin, I don't even want to look at him. A trace of anger flashed across Jin Zhaoyang's eyes. He struggled to stand up, still wanting to argue with Arbor and the others. Principal Yun sighed and waved his hand to let someone take him away. Jin Zhaoyang's argument was really laughable. Just now, everyone was not blind. Everyone saw that from the beginning to the end, Jin Zhaoyang was attacked by only one jade talisman. Where did the 5 jade talismans come from? When Jin Zhaoyang was taken away, he still angrily yelled twice, unwilling to submit. Until he was dragged out of the practice field, that ear-piercing sound finally stopped. Emolien's cold eyes calmly swept towards the direction Jin Zhaoyang left. Her eyes were abnormally cold and her fingertips quickly swiped under her sleeves. The word bind was left on the jade talisman. At the same time, a group of hidden guards outside the royal school received the crown prince's instructions. When Jin Zhaoyang was pushed out of the royal school, the big gift that greeted him was a snow-white flash of sword light. Tian Yun's people have even infiltrated the royal school. On the way back to Winter Forest Court, Alba frowned and said, perhaps without them knowing, Tian Yun had already infiltrated the big families of the 3 continents. He thought of the corpse puppet that appeared in the Mu family's backyard. Qiao Mu creased her brows. Could it be that there were also people from Tian Yun in the Mu family? Could Shi Huixin be related to Tian Yun? If that's the case, doesn't that mean that Tian Yun's people have been lurking in the Mu family for at least 10 years? They returned to Donglin Garden, changed their clothes, and had dinner. After a while, Holy Sun Mi Yen and the others also came back. They glanced at Alba coldly. Alba raised the corners of his mouth. Holy Sun Mi Yen actually came back? She had really underestimated how thick-skinned this Holy Sun was. Both sides had already shed all pretense of cordiality, yet he could still bring his men back to Donglin Garden as if nothing had happened. I have already paid the fee, Holy Sun Mayan said angrily and led his men to his unfinished house. He had already paid for 5 days of accommodation. No matter what, he had to make up for it. The little Stoic and her companions looked at each other in dismay. For some reason, they felt that this lofty Sir Holy Sun seemed to be a bit down to earth. An hour later, a message was delivered to Holy Sun Mayan. My lord, Jin Zhaoyang has been taken care of. Holy Sun Mayan smashed a small square table into pieces with a slap. The priest accompanying him on the side couldn't help but twitch his eyelids. Heavens, Sir Holy Sun smashed the only table in the house that could hold a tea set. The enemy was even more powerful than he had imagined. That D*MN Crown Prince of the Divine Province, this black-hearted and merciless guy. He must have secretly sent people to take care of Jin Zhaoyang. Chapter 28:15. D*MN. Jin Zhaoyang was actually of some use. After all, he was already a yellow-level talisman practitioner. Where is he? Holy Sun Mi Yen asked solemnly. The corpse can't be found anymore. The air rippled slightly. A man wearing a white robe and a white scarf that only revealed his eyes stood next to Holy Sun Mi Yen and reported with his head bowed. D*MN. Holy Sun Mi Yen cursed again. The teacup in his hand cracked with a soft shattering sound before ultimately shattering into powder. The tea dripped down Mi Yan's palm and dripped onto the floor. The priests in the room didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It would be fine if Jin Zhaoyang's corpse didn't even exist, but if that corpse was taken back for research. Holy Sun Mi Yen creased his brows and thought, the Crown Prince of the Divine Province shouldn't be so troublesome. He must have sent people to clean up that punk. Are you sure he's dead? Yes. That white-robed man nodded submissively. There are still many bloodstains on the ground. Judging from the amount of blood, he was destined to die. Holy Sun Mi Yen coldly said, they're all useless people. Holy Sun, then what should we do next? A priest quickly fawned over him. Don't tell me we're going to let that little Stoic continue running rampant like this? Let her be happy for a few days first. Holy Sun Mi Yen snorted. When we enter the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm, she'll be in big trouble. On the other side, Prince Mo glanced at the little fellow who was already sound asleep. He stroked her face with his fingers before leaving in the middle of the night. However, just as he reached Donglin Park's entrance, he discovered a tall black figure leaning against the wall, seemingly waiting for him for a long time. Emolienne rolled her eyes. What? You did it. Our dear Duan Yu jumped out from the corner and sized him up in confusion. It's the middle of the night. Why didn't you change your clothes before going out? He was still wearing the snow-white academy uniform from the day. It was so white that it reflected light in the night. Emolienne silently glanced at Duan Yu, who was wearing a black skin-tight suit. You were a thief? I followed you. What an annoying fellow. Crown Prince Mo grumpily glared at him again. Are you sure you want to meddle in this matter? That's right, it's everyone's responsibility to deal with an organization like Tian Yun, isn't it? Every man has his own responsibility. He's just harboring ill intentions towards my wife. Crown Prince Mo harumphed before turning around, his figure flitting into the night. Duan Yu naturally hurried to catch up, and he even commented rather noisily, "I went out to take a look just now, and the scene was filled with blood and minced meat. What the hell is that?" Since Jin Zhaoyang was not dead, it meant that the things on the ground were not him. The minced meat is naturally his. Mo Lien coldly curled her lips. Anyway, it was fine as long as he didn't die completely. As for blood, just add some chicken blood to it. By making the scene a little more disgusting, they would naturally be able to fool everyone. Is it Jin Zhaoyang's life lantern? It's with me. Mo Lien said faintly, just block his life lantern. Holy Sun Mi Yen shouldn't be able to sense this person at all now. This person was still so cautious when doing things, Duan Yu inwardly thought. Holy Sun Mi Yen truly had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to be enemies with this person. Those who want to harm my Jojo naturally have to pay the corresponding price. Mo Lien only summoned Little Seven when they were far away from the academy. Chapter 28:16. The two swiftly rode the dragon and stealthily arrived at the southern side of north-facing Great Forest under the cover of the night. They followed the Jade Messenger talisman to a valley. Duan Yu was a bit unsettled. This punk had only been here for 2 days, yet he had already found a place to contact and settle down. From the looks of it, he had already sent people to settle down in this small valley. This small valley was hidden in the southern side of north-facing Great Forest. The valley entrance was usually filled with miasma and poisonous insects, so people rarely came here. Duan Yu looked at the stone tablet erected at the valley entrance. The 2 words north-facing had already peeled off and become unrecognizable. The stone tablet had been worn down with the passage of time, as if someone had lived here several hundred years ago. North-facing valley? Duan Yu's puzzled gaze swept towards Mo Lien. The latter nodded slightly. This north-facing valley entrance is protected by a talisman matrix, so it's quite hidden. I sent people in to take a look. Someone should have lived here before. However, there hasn't been anyone living here for the past few decades. I think this place is a bit small, but it's not a bad place to settle down temporarily, so I had some people move in and stay nearby. Duan Yu, you planted so many people here in north-facing Great Forest, but did you inform the nearby mercenary groups? Mo Lien gave him a, "You still need to inform them," look. Duan Yu thought it made sense. With this guy's personality, he would probably eliminate anyone who came to provoke him. What was the point of informing them? North-facing Great Forest was a large dye vat where the strong preyed on the weak to begin with. There were all sorts of factions here, so it was inevitable that Prince Mo would attract covetous eyes when he brought people to settle down in the southern side. It was normal for him to be targeted. Thankfully, we haven't been stationed here for long. The nearby large level 5 and level 6 mercenary groups should still be observing for now. The other small gangs don't have much of an impact on us. As they spoke, the two had already entered the small valley under the guidance of a black-clothed youth and headed straight for the dungeon. This dungeon was actually a converted cave. 2 rows of torches hung on the walls on both sides, illuminating the inside of the cave. Huifeng walked up and saluted Prince Mo and Duan Yu with a chuckle. "Your Highness, we've already properly greeted them, but they couldn't confess anything. It seems they really don't know anything. However, we did find a strange person in the prison." Huh? Mo Lien stopped in her tracks. Weirdo? Duan Yu also couldn't resist asking curiously, "What, did you discover that there were still survivors in the prison when you garrisoned it?" "Yes." Huifeng nodded vigorously. "We also find it very strange that this is actually a living person." Mo Lien and Duan Yu were taken aback, but their interest was immediately piqued. "Let's go take a look." Huifeng led the 2 of them past a cage made of wooden fences and into the innermost part of the dungeon. Separated by the thick and solid fences, they gazed at the black shadow lying in the corner. Duan Yu walked up and knocked on the fence several times. "Hey!" The black shadow didn't react at all. It just lay there motionless. "Someone went in?" "Tong went in just now." The two of them turned to look at Tong, who was following behind them like a shadow. The latter stepped forward and reported, "This subordinate discovered that this person is somewhat mystical. The tendons in his arms and legs were clearly snapped, and he was so hungry that he was only skin and bones, but he was indeed alive." "Let's go in and take a look," Duan Yu said. Hui Feng opened the prison door, and the group quickly walked inside. Chapter 28:17. He's not pretending, right? Duan Yu walked up with a grin. He looked unconcerned, but he was actually on full alert. He casually took a rod from Hui Feng and slowly flipped over the shadow in the corner. That person flipped over and faced the sky. His empty eyes exuded a hint of lifelessness as he stared fixedly at them. Strictly speaking, he really couldn't be considered looking at them because he was clearly blind. "Who are you?" the Crown Prince asked. "Your Highness, he's a mute. Su has already examined him." Tong whispered, "Not only are the meridians in his limbs severed, but he's also deaf, mute, and blind." Mo Lien involuntarily creased her brows. This was too inconceivable. "You're certain he lived here alone for several decades?" Tong nodded. "According to the traces here, that is indeed the case. So this person was deaf, blind, and mute, and had been paralyzed here for several decades? How did he survive?" Duan Yu was perplexed. "He relied on medicinal liquid to survive." A voice came from outside the bars. A middle-aged man entered with him. He wore a cyan robe and looked very proper. "Su, what do you mean?" Su Shuatao smiled faintly. "Everyone, please follow me." Everyone followed Su outside the prison cell. Su pointed at the stone trough at the top of the cave and sighed. "Many pills are stored there, and there's a very elaborate mechanism outside. According to my calculations, every 24 hours, a pill will be sent down from the stone trough." Oh! Realization dawned on Hui Feng. "That funnel below is for receiving pills?" "That's right." A hint of admiration involuntarily appeared in Su's eyes. This should be the handiwork of an extremely outstanding mechanism master. There's also a container for draining rainwater on the side. Once the two are combined, it becomes a nutritious medicinal liquid. And that guy has been lying in that place all this time because he was imprisoned there. He can only helplessly wait for the medicinal liquid to fall from the sky every day. This medicinal liquid is truly good. Su said, "It doesn't need to be taken orally. It can be absorbed by the body through any inch of skin. Even if you can only maintain a half-dead state, it's impossible for you to have the strength to kill yourself." What a speechless life! He didn't know which damned master had come up with such a torturous punishment. Who knew what kind of thing that unlucky fellow had done to incur the wrath of the mechanical grandmaster engineer to seek revenge like this? He had stayed here for decades, neither dead nor alive. It was truly too tragic. Duan Yu and Mo Lien exchanged glances before suddenly asking with a chuckle, "Where's Jin Jiayong? Bring him here." Mo Lien was stunned for a moment, but she immediately understood. He nodded and said to Hui Feng, "Bring him over." Soon, Jin Jiayong was brought to this small prison cell. There wasn't a single piece of good flesh on this fellow's body, and his face was swollen like a pig's head. He looked at Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others in horror. The meaning in his eyes was as if he was looking at several demons. He probably never imagined that he would fall into such a miserable state in his life. If it was possible, he really wished he could turn back time. He wouldn't have accepted the mission of provoking and humiliating the little stoic even if he died. So regretful, so regretful. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in life. What are you doing?" Chapter 28:18. It was only after Jin Zhaoyang opened his mouth that he realized his voice was trembling. Cowardly, too cowardly. He, a grand yellow-rank great talisman practitioner, actually fell to this state. It was truly a case of a tiger being bullied by dogs when it fell to the plains. I confessed everything. Jin Zhaoyang's voice trembled as he said, It was Holy Sun Mi Yen who hired me. He wanted to take Miss Qiao down a notch. Do you see this person? Duan Yu interrupted Jin Zhaoyang with a grin, indicating for him to look at the pile of junk lying in the corner. The tendons in his arms and legs are all rotten, and he's all skin and bones, but he's not dead. Do you know why? Because the Crown Prince didn't want him to die so easily. Duan Yu blinked and said, You also want to become like this person? I wonder if you can survive 30 years in this dungeon. Jin Zhaoyang's vision darkened. He only felt that life was hopeless, and his future was terrifyingly dark. He crumpled to the ground like a puddle of mud. He scrambled to the front of the two and confessed with tears and snot streaming down his face, I really told you everything I know. I can swear that I'll tell you everything I know. Oh. Then what about the heavenly fate? A faint light flashed through Prince Mo's eyes. Jin Zhaoyang hastily wailed, I confess everything. You're talking about the faction behind Sir Holy Sun, right? Xiao Xiao really doesn't know. I am only a very peripheral member. If you didn't tell me today, I wouldn't even know that the organization behind Sir Holy Sun is called Tian Heavenly Fate. The two had been observing his expression while he was speaking, and they couldn't help but frown when they heard this. The two exchanged a look. Prince Mo, I used a dictum talisman on him. He can't lie in this state of mental breakdown, so he probably really doesn't know. Duan Yu, kill him. Deal with it, Crown Prince Mo said coldly. However, Jin Zhaoyang actually felt a sense of relief after hearing this. He would rather die than live for several decades like that pitiful person with crippled limbs. Your Highness, please wait. Teacher Su cupped his hands and said, I discovered an extremely strange constitution in this person's body. It seems to be some kind of medicine that has taken up residence in his body. His body is very strange. Mo Lien and Duan Yu looked at each other before turning to look at Mr. Su at the same time. They asked in unison, Did you discover anything? For the time being, I can only extract some blood from this person's body for analysis and research. Mr. Su cupped his hands and said, Mo Lien explained to Duan Yu, Sir Su has a certain level of research on formations, pills, and talismans. Since he said so, it means that there is indeed something strange about Jin Zhaoyang's body. Thank you, sir. Duan Yu exchanged a look with Mo Lien before saying with a smile, If Sir can find out what's strange about Jin Zhaoyang's body, it would be a great help to us. Mr. Su hurriedly said humbly, Your Highnesses are too polite. This is something that I should do. Mo Lien then turned to Sir Su and said, Then I will hand this person over to Sir Su for you to study. If you make any progress in your research, please tell me everything you know. Certainly. Mr. Su quickly bowed in salute. Mo Lien said to the two youths behind her, Shi Yi, Dark Shang, you two will follow Sir and assist him in the future. All the materials needed for the research must be properly prepared. Yes. The two youths immediately cupped their fists in salute. Mr. Su was a bit overwhelmed by the favor and repeatedly returned the salute. Chapter 28:19. Mo Lien turned around and walked out of the prison. She pursed her thin lips when she saw Duan Yu's odd expression. What? Have the subordinates of the Night Pavilion never rebelled before? What kind of nonsensical names did His Highness the Crown Prince come up with? Humph. Prince Mo turned to leave haughtily. However, they heard Jin Zhaoyang's terrified screams. Let me out. What are you doing? Don't lock me up here. Don't. Where are you taking me? Just kill me. Just kill me. Shut up. Duan Yu turned around and coldly glanced at him. He sarcastically said, Right now, we merely need you to cooperate and provide some blood. If you don't cooperate, do you want to become like him? After saying this, Duan Yu gestured with his eyes for him to look at the black shadow huddled in the corner. Jin Zhaoyong violently shuddered, and then he wilted. He repeatedly nodded in agreement. Don't make me like this. I'll provide. I'll provide. I'll definitely tell you everything I know and help you without reserve. Duan Yu swept him a glance before following him out of the prison. After exiting the dungeon, Hui Feng walked up to ask, Your Highness, how should we deal with the living dead in the dungeon? Deal with him, Emo Lien replied apathetically. It was also a very painful thing for that person to stay like this, neither dead nor alive. Speaking of which, he had helped him a lot. Okay. Hui Feng nodded and had one of his hidden guards go deal with the cripple in the dungeon. However, it wasn't long before the entire dungeon emitted a vibrating hum. The hidden guards guarding the door were confused and wanted to rush in to investigate, but they were instantly sent flying by a gust of air and crashed to the ground with a clatter. Emo Lien and Duan Yu's expressions changed at the same time, and they rushed into the dungeon again. At this time, the dungeon was littered with shattered bricks and stones. That inexplicable force had also blasted out a semicircular gap in the sturdiest wooden fence. Fortunately, Su Shuatao had 2 secret guards protecting him, so he didn't suffer any serious injuries. On the other hand, Jin Zhaoyong, who had been seriously injured before, was thrown out by this force and landed at the entrance of the dungeon. It was clear that he was on the verge of death. Su Shuatao hurriedly ordered people to carry Jin Zhaoyong out for treatment. Inside the dungeon, many secret guards stood by Prince Mo's side, looking at the blurry black shadow in the cage. Just now, it was this person who had emitted a very strong energy fluctuation that had caused half of the prison cell to collapse in an instant. What the hell was this person? Half of his body was already paralyzed and unable to move, so how could he still release such a powerful force? Duan Yu narrowed his eyes as he sized up that person. That weirdo who had been huddling in the corner the entire time had already sat up at this time, and his eerie eyes stared fixedly at him and Emo Lien. Emo Lien frowned. This person is very strange. Be careful. Your Highness, there's actually a cave here. Hui Feng's voice attracted everyone's attention. Emo Lien and Duan Yu walked over one after the other. Sure enough, they saw that a cave had been broken open in the prison cell, and foam poured in from the inside with a whoosh. At a glance, it seemed like there was no end in sight. Hui Feng's figure swayed slightly before he was instantly pulled over by Emo Lien. There seemed to be a very strong suction force underground. If a person stood at the entrance of the cave, they really would be pulled in if they weren't careful. Chapter 28:20. Your Highness, how about I go down and take a look? Hui Feng nimbly tied a rope around his waist. How can you go down with this rope? Duan Yu glanced at him and pursed his lips. The gales below are like knives. Although you've used a protective shield, the rope is exposed, so it'll definitely be cut the moment you go down. Emo Lien looked at him. You have a solution? Duan Yu's hand swept out, and a metal rope landed in his hand. I'll go down and take a look. Hui Feng hastily stopped him and said, Let me go. Duan Yu waved his hand and tied that strange metal rope around his waist before handing the other end to Emo Lien. Then, he jumped into that pitch-black hole without another word. Emo Lien felt her hand tighten slightly, and she forcefully pulled on the rope in her hand. That metal rope immediately extended endlessly into the depths of the hole. Hui Feng couldn't help but be speechless. Heavens, just how deep is this hole? Prince Chen had already gone down for more than 5 minutes, but this rope was still extending endlessly. After several more minutes passed, Emo Lien took a step backwards. He raised and flung his left hand, pulling hard on the metal rope with a backhand. That strange rope was stretched straight and taut, falling vertically into the dark hole, stretched until it was straight. Hui Feng hastily wanted to go up and help, but he only took a step back when he saw Prince Emo shaking his head at him. Ahem. A muffled cough sounded especially clear in the silence of the surroundings. Everyone reflexively turned their heads and shockingly discovered that the filthy figure that had originally curled up into a ball was actually slowly standing up. Weren't the meridians in his limbs severed? Hui Feng blurted out. All the hidden guards instantly felt their hair stand on end, and they surged forward to firmly protect His Highness the Crown Prince in the middle as they focused on dealing with that strange person. Cough, cough, cough. The strange person let out very strange coughs, as if he hadn't spoken for several decades. As soon as he opened his mouth, it was as if a wheel had run over him, and even his vocal cords were a bit torn. Everyone was on high alert, waiting for the strange man to make his move. However, after waiting for a long time, there was still no movement from the other party. That pair of serene eyes seemed to be a little focused, and his gaze fell on them indifferently. Hui Feng was considered experienced and knowledgeable, but he couldn't help but feel a bit horrified at this moment. Who had ever seen a blind and mute guy whose limbs and veins were all broken slowly recover in less than an hour? Was he a freak? Your Highness. Hui Feng felt that he needed to quickly take His Highness the Crown Prince away from this place. This strange person seemed to have too many variables. Emolian gave him a look, telling him to calm down. At this moment, he was holding on to the metal rope, so naturally, he couldn't escape. Fortunately, Duan Yu's movements were quick, and it didn't take long for him to be hauled up by Emolian along the rope. There was still something wrapped in a piece of cloth on his shoulder. As soon as he jumped to the ground, he hurriedly threw the thing on his shoulder to the ground and jumped to the side with a dark face. It stinks. It was really stinky. Emolian also caught a whiff of this odor, and she couldn't help but frown as she took a step back. That cloth unraveled, revealing a person with disheveled hair and dirt all over his body, as if he had been buried in the ground for several decades. He was filthy and smelly. Probably even the beggars on the streets were a bit better than him. By now, Duan Yu had already seen the strange person's appearance in the corner. What happened to him? He stood up. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.